Hello guys, welcome back to Fans Recap. Today I will show you a drama, action, war film from 2020, entitled Greyhound. Spoilers ahead. Relax, enjoy the video. The beginning of the film shows a convoy of 37 ships, carrying war supplies and troops to Liverpool, England. They are going to pass through a track called the Black Pit, the mid-Atlantic gap which is outside the range of air cover. They relied on 3 light destroyers, and 1 Fetcher-class destroyer called the Greyhound, which was captained by Ernest Krauss, who served as the protector, in the event of a sudden attack from the German U-boat. After 3 days escaping from aerial surveillance, and passing through the Black Pit, Krauss as the captain, always monitored the condition of the convoy, and the situation of the track they were on. At this time, they haven't found any suspicious contact, and the confirmation state were in accordance. But suddenly, Krauss received a Morse from the main ship of the convoy, who reported that they had detected a German transmission, some 15 miles to the starboard. Meanwhile, 2 of the destroyers, call sign Harry and Eagle, had left the convoy formation, because they were on a hunt. Knowing that, Captain Krauss ordered Harry and Eagle to return to the formation for securing the convoy. In the meantime, the 3rd destroyer, call sign Dicky, which was on the starboard side of the convoy, was asked to always be prepared and alert to its radar. The Greyhound also moved to starboard and began hunting for German U-boats or submarines. Captain Krauss began giving combat-ready directions to the entire crew, including Carl, who was on the radar. Then, Carl reported that he had detected an enemy submarine 15 miles from the surface to refill oxygen. The Greyhound moved towards that submarine, so that it could see clearly, and immediately attacked it. Captain Krauss began to strategize, and find the right time to attack. However, in the midst of the pursuit, the German submarine suddenly dived and disappeared from the radar. Knowing this, the captain didn't want to give up. He immediately ordered Carl to find and estimate the direction of the enemy's movement.
Aye, aye, sir.
With the help of his friends, Carl tried to calculate using a certain formula. And finally, they could guess where the submarine went. Greyhound immediately headed for the specified coordinates. The crew in the sonar department suddenly heard clearly the sound of the propellers, suspected to be from the enemy submarine, moving further and further beneath the Greyhound.
Contact lost.
Sonar reports contact lost, sir.
As this caused the sonar crew to start losing ground to the enemy, he explained to Captain Krauss that this would happen if the enemy submarine tried to evade the sonar, by moving away or turning off their engines. Okay guys, here are some information. Sonar systems are used primarily to detect noise from marine objects, and its range is limited. While radar is used to detect objects and their position relative to any current location on surface. That means the detection of ancient warships was not as sophisticated and not as optimal as it is today. Okay, let's carry on. After a while, the sonar crew again managed to detect the enemy submarine at a distance of 900 meters to the left, and he immediately reported it to Captain Krauss. The crew who heard that became increasingly tense, and they got ready to take their respective positions. But suddenly, the captain ordered to turn the ship to the starboard with average speed. Clearly that decision made all the crew silent, because Krauss didn't chase the enemy who was currently on the left. Captain Krauss used that strategy so the enemy thought the Greyhound were no longer chasing them. And surely, the enemy came back after them. As the enemy's submarine approached, Krauss immediately ordered the Greyhounds to return to alert. All crew grew increasingly anxious, while the sonars quickly counted down their distance. When the enemy's location and distance were known, Captain Krauss immediately ordered his crew to drop some anti-submarine bombs. After the attack was launched, Krauss went out and saw if there were any floating bodies or enemy ship debris. Unfortunately, he saw nothing. He guessed the attack didn't hit the enemy ship. Not long after, the crew saw oil leaking on the water, which meant the enemy's ship had been destroyed. All the crew of the Greyhound were delighted, except for the captain. He looked sad because he thought that the enemy soldiers are also human beings, regardless of whether they are enemies or not. Their joy didn't last long because a few hours later the German submarine began to show its fangs. They began to counterattack by attacking the rear of the convoy. Despotiko and Kadena ships became victims of enemies' torpedoes and immediately evacuated all of their crew. Knowing of the attack, Kraus ordered his crew to move to the rear to secure the convoy. Suddenly, a torpedo came flying towards them. Luckily, Kraus made a sharp maneuver and he managed to avoid the enemy's attack. Shortly afterwards, Kraus received a report from the Dicky, Eagle, and Harry that each of them had been surrounded by 2 ships, which meant that in total they had to face off against 6 German submarines. Kraus said, the German submarines were like a pack of wolves that would prey on them at nightfall. Because at night, ships on the surface would be very difficult to see the movement of the submarine. As night fell, the German submarines began to appear on the surface one by one. This signified that they were ready for battle. Therefore, the captain tried to find a way to deal with attacks from German submarines. However, because the temperature was extremely cold, it made all the crew shivering. Plus, the wipers and radar devices were also started to jam due to freezing. Long story short, the dreaded night came. The Greyhound convoy couldn't do much and only hoped that the convoy's ships could survive the enemy's attack. The battle began when the German ships started firing flares so that their position was discovered. Kraus, who realized that the enemy was planning an attack strategy, began to look for loopholes by paying attention to the situation around him. Kraus saw a submarine attacking the convoy at the rear. The captain immediately chased after them and began to attack. But the German submarine managed to avoid the attack by diving into the ocean. In the midst of the chase, the Greyhound nearly collided with a merchant ship. The situation grew tense when British Guard ships opened fire on the Greyhound. They thought that Greyhound was one of the German ships because of the limited visibility. And suddenly the sonar crew heard that German submarines were approaching. Hearing this, Kraus immediately ordered to throw some water bombs. But unfortunately, they had to lose a few bombs just for a gas cylinder that the German ship deliberately threw away as a diversion. Shortly after, a German submarine called the Grey Wolf radioed Kraus. The captain of the Grey Wolf threatened that he would soon sink the Greyhound and the entire convoy. All of the crew became more and more worried. And surely, the German submarines were getting more aggressive. They started firing torpedoes and blowing up several of the convoy's ships. That night, Kraus was pensive after receiving a report that he had lost 5 ships that had about 200 people on board. The captain's face looked very depressed and he still didn't know what to do. Who would have thought that his first assignment as captain would be full of disaster? Meanwhile, the distance between them to get to the air protection point is still 26 hours away. Plus, the victims continued to fall and the supply of weapons were running low. In the morning, the German submarines were back in action and started firing torpedoes at Greyhound and Dicky. Luckily, they were able to dodge the attack. Then, Kraus engaged Dicky to work together to counterattack. The captain began to position the Greyhound. Meanwhile, Dicky dropped several bombs into the water. Moments later, the sonar crew detected an enemy ship. And it turned out that the German ship rose to the surface because it had been hit by a bomb from Dicky. Seeing that opportunity, Kraus immediately opened fire on the enemy ship. Dickie tried to help Greyhound to catch up to the submarine. Once when the Greyhound was about to shoot down the enemy ship, unfortunately, Dickie was in the firing line. This made Kraus withstand his attacks. And suddenly, a German ship opened fire on the Greyhound. Kraus then ordered an attack on the German submarine until it was destroyed. After the attack, the intensity of the battle began to subside. Kraus then mourned because it turned out that 3 of his men died from the attack earlier. Even though he was in a very precarious condition, the captain still had time to hold a death ceremony for his men as a sign of respect. Kraus knew that Eagle had already been badly damaged from last night's battle, and now there only Harry and Dickie were left. Since there was still 14 hours before reaching a safe place, and Kraus notices that his convoy were getting weaker, he then ordered Karl to send a message and ask the British Navy for help. Not long after, Kraus got a reply and he immediately translated it. It turned out that this convoy had been directed to a meeting point where the coordinates were already within the range of air cover. And Kraus also explained that the coordinates could be taken about 4 hours away. At this moment, Kraus looked very tired. Plus, the Grey Wolf was starting to radio threats again. A few hours later, the Greyhound was attacked by 2 German submarines, which fired 2 torpedoes. Due to precise calculations, the first torpedo was avoided by the Greyhound with a sharp maneuver. And it also managed to dodge the second torpedo. After successfully overcoming both torpedoes, now things were starting to turn around. Kraus immediately ordered to go forward and approach one of the German ships closest to them. Realizing that it was about to be attacked, the Grey Wolf quickly dived. The Greyhound then tried to counter fire relentlessly until the enemy ship was finally destroyed. Their tension increased again when suddenly the other German submarine appeared and almost fired a missile. Luckily, at that time, air support arrived on time and immediately dropped a water bomb. As a result, the last German submarine was destroyed. After going through a 48 stressful hour, Kraus could finally breathe a sigh of relief. At the meeting point, several British ships were seen welcoming them to provide protection. And the movie ends. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe this channel and see you in the next video.